Ever looked at a vine and thought, man, I bet that thing can see? No, probably not right.
But get this, there's this vine down in Chile, Boquila trifoliolata, and it's making scientists rethink what we thought we knew about plants.
Really?
Yeah, this vine, it can change its leaves to mimic the plants around it.
Like color changing.
No, I'm talking way more than color. I'm talking the shape, the size, even how the veins look.
Wow, okay, now that's cool. What, like a chameleon vine? How's it do that?
That's the million-dollar question, right?
Yeah.
So what's the going theory? Is it sniffing out clues, like some kind of plant-to-plant communication?
Well, that's one of the first things that researchers thought about, right?
Makes sense to me.
So they thought maybe it was picking up on chemical signals from the plants around it.
Okay, so like a bloodhound, but with leaves.
Yeah, kind of. Like a plant version of a bloodhound, following a scent. Another theory was, what if it's gene transfer? Like maybe there are microscopic organisms carrying information from one plant to another.
Oh, so like little messengers.
Exactly. They thought maybe these tiny things could be the secret ingredient. I mean, it sounds crazy, but nature's full of surprises.
You said it, nature has a way of one-upping us, doesn't it? So we've got chemical signals, we've got microscopic careers, but it sounds like neither of those panned out.
Yeah, you're right. Neither of those quite cracked the code. And that's where things get really, really interesting because some researchers had a radical thought. What if, and I know this sounds crazy, but what if this vine could actually see?
Hold on a minute, are we talking plants with eyeballs now?
Because that's a whole other deep dive right there.
Laughing. Not quite eyeballs as we picture them, but you're definitely picking up what I'm throwing down.
Okay, I'm intrigued, so walk me through this. How do you even test if a plant can see?
Well, to test this whole seeing theory, scientists set up an experiment, but with a twist. They brought in an artificial plant with plastic leaves, totally different from any of the real plants in the Boquila's environment.
So they threw a curveball at it, a plastic one. What happened? Did our supervine see through the charade?
Not at all. This is where it gets mind-blowing. The Boquila tried to mimic the plastic leaves.
You're kidding. It saw plastic and thought, hey, I could rock that look.
Yep, totally flipped the script on what we thought we knew about plants.
Wait, so you're saying this vine saw a bunch of plastic and thought it needed a makeover?
I mean, I've heard of plants needing sunlight, but a fashion sense, that's a new one.
But seriously, this wasn't just some random, that's odd observation, was it? You said they designed an experiment around this, right?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, this wasn't just a casual observation. Scientists, they don't mess around.
Right.
They want to be absolutely sure that they're seeing what they think they're seeing. So they get down to business and they set up a really controlled environment for this vine.
Okay, so like what did this botanical runway look like?
Okay, so picture this. They carefully position this artificial vine with the plastic leaves above the Boquila.
Okay.
And then they use these opaque shelves, kind of like blinders,
Uh-huh.
to make sure that the Boquila can only see certain leaves at a time. So that way they can be sure that it's not reacting to some other environmental factor.
Right.
It was all about really isolating that visual cue.
Oh, that's clever. Okay, so what happened? Did the Boquila leaves suddenly sprout like plastic replicas?
I have to know.
Not quite plastic replicas. Thankfully, that would be, I don't know, even for this vine, a bridge too far.
But the changes, they were really remarkable. Remember how we talked about those features, the leaf area and perimeter, the length and the width?
Right, like a botanical tailor taking measurements.
Exactly. And guess what? The leaves, the ones exposed to those plastic shapes, they started to change. They actually became longer and narrower, almost as if they were trying to match.
Hold on, so the leaves actually changed shape. It wasn't just like a subtle thing.
Oh, it was definitely noticeable. But it gets even weirder. They took a close look at the veins on the leaves.
Yeah.
You know those intricate little patterns you can see under a microscope?
Yeah, those little lifelines of the leaf.
Right. Well, the mimic leaves, the ones copying the plastic, they had fewer veins, and the ones they did have were thinner. It was almost like the Boquila thought, well, if those plastic leaves can pull off the no veins look, maybe I can too.
Wow, extreme makeover, plant edition. But this whole seeing thing still seems so far out there. I mean, are there actually scientists who believe that plants could have some form of vision?
There are.
Really?
Yeah, it's a hot topic for sure. Some scientists point to these things called plant ocelli. Have you ever heard of those?
Ocelli. That sounds a bit like ocular, as in, Eyes,
Are we talking about plants with eyeballs now?
because that's a whole
Yes.
other episode right there.
I know, right?
Yeah.
It does conjure up some interesting visuals. They're not eyeballs in the traditional sense, but you're on the right track with that ocular connection. Plant ocelli are these really fascinating light-sensitive cells, and they're different from the ones that plants use for photosynthesis.
Oh, interesting. So not quite eyes as we know them, but more like what? Tiny little windows that let them sense light.
That's a great way to put it. I mean, they're not as complex as our eyes,
Right.
but
Yeah.
the theory is that they allow plants to detect light patterns, maybe even shapes, like they're painting a picture of their surroundings with light instead of with paint.
Okay, so potentially like a very, very, very basic form of sight.
And this Boquila study, this just added fuel to that fire.
Exactly. If this rind can adapt to mimic even artificial shapes, it makes you wonder what else is it picking up on.
Right.
It definitely lends more weight to the idea that plant ocelli, even in other species, it could be more than just simple light detectors.
This. So we've got this vine. It's pulling off these crazy copycat moves. Maybe it's got some kind of primitive sight. We're talking about light-sensitive cells that sound like something out of Star Trek.
But what's the big deal here? Why should we even care if plants can see? Or, dare I say, think?
That's the question, isn't it? And it's got scientists all fired up.
I mean, think about it. If plants are more aware of what's going on around them than we ever thought possible,
Yeah.
if they're not just passively soaking up the sun, but they're actually responding to their environment, it totally changes how we understand nature.
It's like that moment when you realize the trees in the park might actually be watching you.
Makes you appreciate that morning stroll a bit more, doesn't it?
It really does. And it's not just about thinking about it, philosophically.
Why, I
Think
agree.
about what it could mean for agriculture. If we can understand how plants see the world,
Right.
maybe we can use that to grow more food, use less water, even help plants survive in really tough conditions.
So it's like we've been treating plants like they're just these background characters,
But maybe, just maybe, they're more like the main characters in their own right.
making decisions and adapting in ways we never even imagined.
Exactly. And that brings us to another big question. If plants can see, potentially, and adapt,
Right.
what other senses might they have? We humans, we're kind of obsessed with our five senses, right?
Sure.
But what if plants, what if they've got this whole sensory world that we don't even know about?
Okay, now you're just messing with me. Are you saying that plants could be smelling and tasting?
Even hearing, and we just haven't figured out how to listen in yet.
Well, there's definitely some evidence that they're picking up on more than just light.
Really?
I mean, some research shows that certain plants can respond to vibrations, to sounds.
Get out of here.
Yeah, like maybe they use those vibrations to find water underground.
So not only can they see the world around them, they might be eavesdropping on us too.
This is incredible. It really makes you realize how much we don't know about nature. I mean, we're talking about plants here, plants.
It's humbling, isn't it?
It really is.
We're just starting to peek into this world of plant senses, and honestly, I think it's going to blow our minds.
I'm totally with you on that. So to wrap things up here, what's the one thing you want our listeners to take away from today's deep dive?
I'd say the next time you see a plant, don't just see a plant. See a living thing. Sensing, adapting, thriving.
It's a whole new way to look at the world, and that's what makes it so exciting to study.
Well said. It's a good reminder that even in our own backyards, there are still amazing things to discover.
Thanks for joining us for this incredible deep dive. Until next time, keep those curious minds buzzing.